I still remember the hiss of the grill that day, the way the smoke curled up into the early evening light, blurring the edges of everyone's faces like a bad dream. If you freeze that moment and zoom in, you can see it all. My wife Emma laughing too hard at a joke I didn't hear, the beer bottle sweating in my hand, and the exact second my life quietly tipped over. It was just a backyard barbecue. Our backyard, our cheap string lights. Our folding chairs from the garage. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just neighbors, coworkers, and the same playlist we always used when we didn't want to think too hard about what music meant. Emma had planned it. She said we needed to host more. People drift when you stop inviting them in, she'd said, scraping old marinade off the grill that morning. Her hair was pulled up, a strand stuck to her cheek with sweat. I kissed that strand away, tasting the salt on her skin. She smiled at me then, different from the one later, softer. Or maybe that's just how I want to remember it. If I'm being honest, I'd felt it long before the barbecue, the space. It showed up first at dinner. She'd sit at the table with her phone just out of reach, screen down like a secret face pressed to the wood. Her replies got thinner. MHMM. Yeah, sure. Whole conversations where her eyes never met mine. I told myself she was tired. Work had been heavy. Her firm had taken on a big client. Late nights, early mornings, urgent emails. I didn't fight it. That's the part that still embarrasses me. I adjusted around her like furniture. I learned to cook quieter, to stack the dishes softer, to keep my questions small and non-invasive. I thought I was being supportive. In reality, I was slowly teaching her that I would accept any version of her as long as she stayed. The first real sign was the perfume, not hers, someone else's, faint and floral, clinging to her blazer when she came home one night. It hit me when she hugged me from behind at the sink. I remember the warmth of her arms, the suds on my hands, and that unfamiliar scent. My brain snatched at explanations. Coworker's hug, someone sprayed in the elevator, store sample. I picked the least painful theory and swallowed it like a dull pill. The second sign was her smile, not the one from our wedding photos. She doesn't even smile like that anymore. This was sharper, quick, almost secret. The kind of smile people wear when they're holding something just for themselves. She started smiling at her phone like that. In the dark of our bedroom, screen lighting her face, that thin private warmth spreading across her features while my side of the bed stayed cold. Sometimes I'd roll over and pretend to cough, just to remind her I was there. She'd lock the screen and mumble, just work stuff. Work stuff never made her glow like that when I knew her at 22. By the time the barbecue came, I'd built a quiet theory in my head. We were just going through a phase. People drift, then return. Marriage is long. This was a corner we'd round together. I clung to that belief like a railing on a shaky staircase. Friends arrived with grocery store salads and six-packs. Kids ran through the yard, a blur of knees and shrieks. The grill smoked steady and loyal. I manned it like a soldier. Burgers, hot dogs, chicken, the easy stuff. Emma floated through the crowd with a pitcher of sangria, refilling, laughing, touching people lightly on the arm. I watched her, host mode. She was always good at this, making other people feel like they were the main character. When we first met, that was part of what drew me in, the way she could turn a crowded room into a soft circle around one person's story. Back then, that person had been me. Hey, chef, don't burn my burger, someone joked behind me. It was Mark, new guy from Emma's office. I'd heard the name a few times over the last few months. Mark said this, Mark thought that. Mark knows this great cafe. He was taller than I'd pictured, with easy posture and the kind of smile that doesn't ask permission. Emma drifted over to us. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. Not like with the others, a little brighter, a tiny hitch in her step. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. But by then, I was looking at everything. Mark, did you try the chicken? She asked, hand brushing his forearm as she passed. Best marinade ever. He's finally good for something. She tossed that last part toward me, teasing, but there was a slight edge in her tone I couldn't place. They shared a look, quick, compact, a small exchange that didn't include me. Something tightened behind my ribs. I plated up a burger and handed it to Mark. Welcome to our chaos, I said. He laughed, thanked me, started talking about some project they were working on. Emma chimed in. They finished each other's sentences once, twice, 3 times. Everyone laughed. I did too. But inside, a quiet voice took notes. The collapse didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. First, I noticed how often they ended up next to each other. At the drinks table, by the patio steps, on the lawn near the fire pit. They were never alone, but people gave them space without knowing they were doing it. A natural perimeter formed, a ring of friends with just enough distance that their low, private tone didn't feel like part of the general noise. At one point, I walked out from the kitchen carrying another tray of food. They were by the fence. Her face tilted up to his hand hovering that inch too close to her waist. There was this softness in her eyes, familiar. I'd seen it in the mirror when I looked at her. Then she smiled. It was a small, contained smile. Not the big, teeth-baring one she used for group photos. This was just for him. A curl of the lips, almost shy, almost guilty, with that flicker of nervous excitement you get when you're standing too near a fire. If a stranger had glanced over, they would have thought, they're flirting. As her husband, I thought, they're already past flirting. Someone yelled my name from the deck, snapping the moment. She turned, noticed me watching, and her smile shifted. Brightened, opened, the performance smile. "Babe, can you grab more plates?" she called, like nothing was wrong. I went inside. The air was cooler in the kitchen, quieter. The sound of the party muffled through glass and walls. I set the plates on the counter and just stood there, looking at the sink full of dishes, the smudge of charcoal on my hand, the 2 wineglasses from last night still on the drying rack. I thought about the perfume, the late nights. The locked phone, the secret smiles. A realization moved through me slowly, like water soaking into a dry sponge. This is happening, not maybe, not possibly. Now, I didn't rage, didn't throw anything. Didn't storm back outside and call her out in front of everyone. Instead, something inside me went very, very still, like a dropped glass hanging in the air, right before it shatters. As I stood there, her laugh floated in from the yard, clear. Happy, full, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. That was when my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from an unknown number. No name, just a line of text and a single image file waiting to be opened. I wiped my hand on a dish towel, my thumb hovering over the screen. The kitchen clock ticked behind me, loud and slow. The grill hissed outside. Her laughter rose again, then softened. I opened the message. The image loaded. My heart clenched so tight I thought for a second I might actually drop to my knees. It was a photo, not explicit, not the kind that would get blurred on social media. Just 2 people in a booth at some dim bar, leaning too close together, her hand on his chest, his fingers curled loosely around her wrist, both of them smiling in that way people do when they've forgotten the rest of the world exists. Emma and Mark, my first thought was stupidly practical. Who took this? The angle was off, a little too high, like someone had pretended to check their phone while secretly snapping the shot. The message above it said only one thing. "You deserve to know." That was it, no explanation, no name, no follow-up. Outside, someone cheered, probably over a board game or a joke. Inside, my chest felt like it was filling with wet concrete. I zoomed in on the photo. Her hair was down, same earrings she was wearing at the barbecue, same necklace I'd given her on our 7th anniversary. She was looking at him the way she used to look at me when we stayed up too late talking about nothing. I set the phone down on the counter, face up, screen still glowing. The plates waited beside it. The hum of the fridge sounded too loud, my breathing too shallow. For a moment I considered ignoring it, deleting it. Walking back outside, flipping burgers, laughing at jokes, pretending I hadn't just watched my marriage fold in on itself. People do that. They choose not to know. They live in the version of reality that doesn't hurt. But the thing about truth is that once you see it, it won't stop staring back. I picked up the plates and walked outside. The sun had dipped lower, turning the sky a washed-out orange. The smell of charcoal hung heavy. Kids ran with sparklers, lines of light scribbled into the air. I found Emma by the fire pit, refilling Mark's drink. He laughed at something she said, eyes crinkling. Her shoulder brushed his as she turned. I watched them for a beat too long. Mark noticed me first. "Hey man, this all looks amazing," he said, lifting his cup in a half-toast. His tone was casual, friendly. Maybe he truly thought I didn't know. Maybe that made it worse. "Thanks," I said. My voice sounded normal to my own ears. Too normal, like it belonged to someone watching a scene instead of living it. Emma's eyes slid to mine. There was a flick of something there, guilt, worry, but it vanished quickly. "Babe, can you bring out the extra chairs from the garage?" she asked. Her hand hovered near Mark's back, not quite touching, like her fingers were remembering his shirt. I nodded, turned away, and did what she asked. Because that's who I'd been for years. The man who brought the chairs, handled the grill, made sure everyone else was comfortable, reliable, steady, safe. That night crawled by in slow motion. Conversations bled into each other. Someone spilled a drink. Someone told a long story about a dog and a vet bill. I laughed in the right places. I asked the right questions. All the while, those 2 kept orbiting each other in my peripheral vision. By the time the last guest left and the backyard emptied, my cheeks hurt from holding my face in place. Emma closed the door, slid the deadbolt, and leaned against it with a sigh. "God, I'm exhausted," she said. She walked past me, collecting empty cups. People are so loud. I watched her move through the quiet house. It felt like observing a stranger in my clothes. "Did you have fun?" I asked. The question came out softer than I meant. She shrugged. "Yeah, it was fine. Everyone seemed to have a good time." She didn't look at me when she said it. In the kitchen, I placed my phone on the table, screen dark now, and waited. Waited for some part of me to either explode or collapse. Neither happened. I just felt tired. When she walked back in, I gestured toward the chair opposite mine. "Can you sit for a minute?" She paused. Her eyes flicked to the clock, then to the hallway like she had somewhere else to be, but she came over, pulled out the chair, sat. "What's up?" she asked. There was caution there, not confusion, not concern, caution. I turned the phone face down between us and tapped the back of it with my thumb. "Someone sent me a photo," I said, "of you and Mark." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her fingers curled slightly against the table edge. She didn't ask to see it, didn't joke, didn't frown and say, "What are you talking about?" That was answer enough. I flipped the phone over, opened the message, and slid it across. She stared at the image for a long time. Her throat moved as she swallowed. "You went out last Thursday," I said quietly. "Team drinks." Silence. The fridge hummed. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. Rain tapped lightly at the window, the first gentle drops of an incoming shower. Finally she exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. Her eyes never left the screen. "Okay." "Okay what?" I asked. Her hand trembled as she pushed the phone back toward me. "I'm not going to insult you by lying," she said. Her voice was thin, like it had been stretched too far and might tear. "Yes, we've been seeing each other." The words didn't hit like a slap. They landed more like a confirmation email for a reservation I never made. "You already suspected this. Here's your proof." "How long?" My own voice surprised me. Calm, steady, she flinched. "A few months." "Define seeing each other, Emma." She closed her eyes for a second. Rain picked up, streaking the glass in slow lines. "Sleeping with," she said, barely audible. Something inside my chest shifted, not broke, just rearranged. Like furniture moved in the dark, there it was. A simple, ugly truth sitting between us on the table. I thought of the late nights, the perfume, the withdrawn dinners, the way her smile had changed. All of it connected now into one clear picture. "Why him?" I asked. I didn't mean it the way it sounded, not as a comparison. More like, "Why anyone? Why not come to me?" She rubbed her forehead. "He listens," she said. A bitter laugh escaped her. "That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But it's different. At work he sees me as capable, wanted, not just." She cut herself off. "Not just what?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something like honesty in her eyes. "Not just safe," she whispered. The word sat there, heavy and unfair. I had built our life around being safe. Stable job, steady routines, bills paid, vacations planned. Safe had been my love language. "You could have talked to me," I said. The hurt slipped in there, raw and childlike. "I would have listened." She shook her head slowly. "I tried," she said. "At dinner, at night, but you were always so sure, so calm, like nothing could really be wrong. I felt like if I said I was drowning, you'd hand me a to-do list or a budget spreadsheet." There it was, her version of the story, her private narrative where I was the steady weight that held her down instead of the anchor that kept us from drifting too far. We sat there in that small kitchen while rain softened the sound of the world outside, two people who once vowed to be everything to each other, now struggling to speak in the same language. "Are you in love with him?" I asked. She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed, but she nodded anyway. "I don't know," she said. "It feels exciting, like I'm alive again. That doesn't excuse what I did, I know that. The thing about hearing your spouse talk about feeling alive with someone else is that it makes you painfully aware of how dead parts of you have gone." "I'm not going to scream," I said quietly. She looked almost surprised. "I'm not going to beg you to stay, but I'm also not going to just let this slide." "What does that mean?" she asked. I looked at the photo again, then at her. "Give me your phone." Her eyes widened. "No. It's not a request." There was a long pause. Then she reached slowly into her pocket, placed the phone next to mine. A small, rectangular confession. I didn't unlock it, not yet, just rested my fingers on it, feeling its faint warmth. "I'm going to find out everything," I said. "Every lie, every night, every detail you decided I wasn't strong enough to handle. And then I'm going to decide what I do with that truth." "Please," she whispered. Tears shone in her eyes now, finally. "I know I broke something, but can we talk about this like adults, not..." "Like what?" I asked. "Like the man you cheated on and the man you cheated with are equals in this conversation." She flinched again. The guilt was real, so was the fear. That night she slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain intensify. My phone lay on the nightstand, face down. Her phone sat beside it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo, her hand on his chest. His fingers on her wrist, that smile. Sometime around 3 a.m., I got up, walked to the kitchen, and made coffee I didn't need. The house was quiet, too quiet. Empty chairs around the table looked like abandoned witnesses. I unlocked her phone. The messages were all there. Threads of conversation stretching back months. Inside jokes, late-night confessions, plans, photos. I read until the lines blurred, until my eyes burned. Until the words stopped feeling like language and turned into pure white noise. One message, near the beginning, hooked my attention. From him, does he suspect anything? Her reply, he trusts me too much to see it. The mug trembled in my hand. For a second, I thought about smashing the phone into the sink, watching glass and metal scatter. Instead, I set it down gently, carefully, like it was a fragile animal. Trust, I realized, can be a kind of blindness, a comfortable one. As dawn began to pale the edges of the windows, a different kind of thought started to take shape. Slow, cold, sharp. If she believed I was too safe, too calm, too blind, maybe it was time to show her what it looked like when I truly saw her, when I decided not to be safe anymore. I stared at both phones on the table, hers full of secrets. Mine with that anonymous message. For the first time since the photo, a strange clarity cut through the fog of hurt. I knew who I needed to talk to first, and it wasn't Emma. In the days that followed, the house took on a hollow sound. The clink of a spoon against a mug echoed longer. Footsteps felt louder on the hardwood. It was as if, in the absence of pretending, everything else decided to stop whispering too. Emma moved out on a Wednesday. No shouting, no broken dishes. No dramatic exit. She packed 2 suitcases, a box of work files, and a few favorite mugs. Left the framed wedding photos on the walls, like artifacts in a museum dedicated to a history neither of us could fully own anymore. We told our families it was a separation. Taking space, she called it. Her voice on the phone was measured, careful. My mother cried quietly after, then tried to sell me forgiveness like a product. These things happen, honey. People make mistakes, you can work through it. I didn't argue, just let her words wash over me and drain away. I went back to work, answered emails, took calls, did all the things that made up my safe reputation. But underneath, a different process had started. I did exactly what I told Emma I would. I found out everything. I traced their messages, their meetups, their little escapes between office hours. I learned the names of the bars they favored, the hotel with the beige curtains, the lie she'd used the night of my father's stroke when she stayed late to finish a presentation. Piece by piece, the story assembled itself. Not just of her affair, but of the version of me she'd constructed to justify it. He's a good guy, she'd written to Mark once. Too good. It's like being married to an airbag. Always there to cushion, never there to crash with you. I read that line 3 times. Then I closed the messages and stared at my reflection in the dark window. An airbag, designated to deploy in emergencies, then shoved back in place until the next impact. The vengeance people imagine is loud. They picture dramatic reveals, public humiliation, someone flipping a table while everyone gasps. What I felt growing in me was quieter, colder, not about making her hurt the way I did. More about making sure the truth she'd avoided would finally sit in front of her and refuse to move. The anonymous number that sent me the photo turned out to belong to someone I'd never met, Lena, Mark's wife. When I called, she answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded like mine, felt tired, hollow, oddly polite. We talked for nearly an hour, pacing through our separate homes under the same gray sky. She'd found out a week before I did. Different photo, same booth, same expression on his face. She'd confronted him. He'd spun something about emotional confusion and needing space. She didn't buy it. When I mentioned the barbecue, she went quiet for a moment. He brought her to our lake house once, she said eventually, introduced her as his work friend. I thought I was crazy for noticing the way she smiled at him. Turns out I was just early. We made a decision, not in anger, but in a kind of calm, exhausted agreement. If they wanted a world built on lies, we would give them one honest day, a single, clear mirror held up to everything they'd chosen. The plan was simple. They had another team barbecue coming up, this time at Mark's place. Emma hadn't told me, but his calendar, open on a shared home computer I once fixed for them, did. Lena still had access. We decided I would come as Emma's husband. Lena would be there as Mark's wife. No screaming, no scenes. Just presence, just the undeniable weight of the people they'd tried to write out of their story. But before that day arrived, Emma came back. It was a Sunday morning when she showed up at the apartment. Rain again. Always rain lately. It blurred the city outside my window into a watercolor smear of lights and motion. I was at the table, coffee cooling beside a legal pad covered in messy notes. Divorce logistics, financial splits. Practical fallout of an emotional disaster. The knock on the door was soft. 3 gentle taps, spaced out like she was giving me time to decide whether to pretend I wasn't home. I opened it anyway. She stood there in a gray hoodie, jeans, hair pulled back. No makeup, no armor. Her eyes were rimmed red, either from crying or not sleeping, maybe both. "Hey," she said. Her voice was small. "Hey." We stared at each other in the hallway's dim light. The smell of coffee from a neighbor's door curled through the air. Somewhere, a TV murmured. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked past me, her shoulders brushing lightly against my chest. That simple contact, once automatic, now felt like an intrusion into foreign territory. She stood by the window, looking out at the wet street below. "It smells the same," she said quietly, "like you." "I haven't changed the laundry detergent," I replied. It was a stupid answer, but it was true. She almost smiled. Almost. "Why are you here, Emma?" She turned back toward me, hands shoved into her hoodie pocket like they were afraid of their own gestures. I wanted to talk," she said, "without lawyers, without sides." "There have been sides for a while," I said. "You just didn't tell me I was on one." She flinched at that, shoulders tightening. "I deserve that," she whispered. "I deserve worse." Silence settled in the room, thick and awkward. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the glass. She took a breath. "I ended things with him," she said. The words came out in a rush like she'd rehearsed them. "I told Mark it was over, that I needed to try to fix what I broke with you." There it was, her return. Not with flowers or grand apologies, but with a sentence that sounded like a plea wrapped in practicality. What did he say? She shrugged, eyes dropping. He was angry, said I was panicking. That we're soulmates and I'm just scared of change. He thinks this is about comfort for me, about me running back to the safe option. I let that sink in, the safe option, the airbag. "Is it?" I asked. She looked up, startled. "What? Is that what this is?" I gestured between us. "You coming here now. Is it because you love me, or because you're afraid of what life looks like without someone like me cushioning the fall?" Her throat worked around a dry swallow. "I don't know," she admitted. "I wish I had a clean answer for you. I miss you. I miss us. I miss the way you make coffee and leave mine on the left because you know I'm right-handed but always pick it up from the wrong side. I miss how you hum without realizing it when you're concentrating. I miss feeling like the world is something we're facing together, not something I'm sneaking around in." Tears spilled over now, quiet and uncontrolled. She wiped them with the sleeve of her hoodie, almost irritated by them. "But I also know I betrayed you," she continued. "And that part of what I miss might just be the version of myself I liked when I was with you, not actually you." That's ugly to say out loud, but it's true. There it was again, her private narrative, stepping carefully into the open. "I'm not a rehab center for your identity crisis," I said softly. She winced like I'd struck her. "I can't be the thing you come back to when the excitement burns you. I'm not a backup generator." "I know," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to just forgive and forget. I don't even know if I'm asking for another chance. I think I just needed to see you, to see what I walked away from when I convinced myself you were the problem." We fell into a heavy stillness. She sat at the edge of the couch. I stayed by the table. An entire marriage stretched between us across a few feet of worn carpet. "Do you love him?" I asked again. The question had changed shape since the kitchen. She stared at her hands. "I loved what he reflected back at me," she said slowly. "With him, I got to be the bold one, the rebellious one. With you, I was the responsible one, the planner, the worrier. I resented that, even though half of it was my own doing." "And with me." She finally met my eyes. "With you, I always felt seen," she said. "Sometimes too seen, like you could tell when I was lying to myself, even when you didn't say anything. That scared me. It also made me feel safe in a way I wasn't ready to admit I needed." It was a twisted sort of compliment, one that landed somewhere between balm and salt on a wound. "I can't unknow what I know now," I said. "About you, about him, about who I turned into trying to keep peace instead of truth." She nodded. "I don't expect you to," she said. I wanted to say I'm sorry, for the way I did this, for using your trust as a shield, for making you the villain in a story where you were just showing up." Her apology sat between us, fragile and real, not enough to rebuild anything, but enough to mark that something had shifted. "There's another barbecue," I said after a while, "at Mark's place, work thing, next weekend." Her eyes widened. "How do you?" "Lena," I said, "his wife." Guilt flashed across her face like lightning. "She knows." "She does now," I replied. "She's the one who sent me the photo." Emma sank back against the couch, stunned. I never meant to hurt her," she said weakly. "As if that mattered," she added with a bitter twist of her mouth. "You and Mark built this lie together," I said, "but you built it on top of two people who never got to consent to being foundations." She swallowed hard. "What are you going to do?" Nothing violent, nothing theatrical, I said. Just show up, let the truth sit in the same space as your secret. No more hiding. She looked at me for a long time. There was fear there and something else. Respect maybe edged with sorrow. You're going? She asked. I am, I said. Lena is too. And me? Her voice was barely audible. That's up to you, I said. But if you go, you don't get to pretend we don't exist while you play house with him in front of your coworkers. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands pressed to her mouth. For a second, she looked like she might be sick. I didn't think. You did, I cut in gently. You just didn't think it would follow you home. The room went quiet again. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist, soft, persistent. Can we ever come back from this? She asked finally. Not as a demand, not even as a real question, more like a thought she couldn't keep inside anymore. I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. The woman who had, somewhere along the way, decided my steadiness was something to work around instead of lean on. I don't know, I said honestly. I think we can move forward. But I'm not sure that path leads back to us. Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't fight the tears. They slid down quietly, marking slow tracks on her cheeks. She stood up after a while, pulling her hoodie sleeves over her hands. Will you let me know what you decide about the barbecue? She asked. You'll know, I said, because if you're there, you'll see me walk in. Our eyes held, full of things we didn't have the language for anymore. She nodded once, then walked to the door. Her hand paused on the handle. I used to think your calm meant you didn't feel things deeply, she said without turning around. I was wrong. It just means when you finally move, it's permanent. The door clicked shut behind her. The room felt both quieter and heavier. I stood in the middle of that silence, the faint smell of her shampoo lingering in the air. The plan with Lena sat in my mind like a stone at the bottom of a river. Solid, unmoving. For the first time since the night of our backyard barbecue, I realized something terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be about getting her back. It would be about getting myself back. The morning of the barbecue at Mark's place arrived wrapped in an odd kind of calm. The rain had finally stopped after days of steady drizzle. The city outside my window looked freshly washed, pavement dark, leaves glossy, the air carrying that clean metallic smell that comes right after a long storm. I woke earlier than I needed to. The light was soft, filtered through thin clouds. For a while I just lay there, listening to the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, the quiet inside my own chest. There was fear there. Of course there was. The thought of standing in the same backyard as Emma and Mark, of watching the architecture of their lives tremble under the weight of our presence, made my stomach knot. But underneath that anxiety was something steadier. A sense that this day wasn't about vengeance in the way I once imagined revenge might feel. It was about closure, about looking the truth in the face and choosing, finally, where to place my feet. I made coffee. The small, familiar ritual soothed me. Scoop, pour, wait. The machine hissed and gurgled, filling the apartment with its warm, bitter scent. I drank it by the window, watching a beam of pale sunlight slowly cross the floor. When it was time, I dressed simply. Dark jeans, a clean shirt, nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed for attention. I wasn't going there to perform. I was going there to witness. Lena texted me as I tied my shoes. Leaving now, she wrote. See you there. Her messages over the last few days had been practical, focused. We weren't allies in some elaborate plot. We were two people trying to walk through the same fire without pretending it wasn't hot. The drive to the suburbs felt surreal. Houses blurred past, neatly trimmed lawns, kids' bikes on driveways, wind chimes tinkling in the mild breeze. I wondered how many of those homes held their own quiet betrayals. How many kitchens had heard the word safe used as an accusation instead of a blessing. Mark's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, white siding, blue shutters, a backyard that stretched into a thin line of trees. Cars already lined the curb. Voices drifted over the fence, laughter, the clink of bottles, the same casual joy that had filled my yard not long ago. I parked a few houses down. Sat there for a minute with the engine off, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel. My heart beat a little faster, but not wildly, just enough to remind me that I cared about what was about to happen. When I stepped out, the air was cool but gentle. Sunlight broke through the clouds in thin, pale bands. Morning light not harsh, not dramatic, just honest. At the gate to the backyard, I paused. Voices were clearer now. I heard Emma's laugh. It hit me right in the center of my chest. For a second, memory layered itself over reality. Her laughing with me on our tiny balcony years ago, feet up on the railing, plastic wineglasses in hand, the future wide open and uncomplicated. Then the moment slipped and all that remained was the present. I pushed the gate open. Heads turned. Conversation stuttered. Not because of me at first, but because on the other side of the yard, Lena was walking in through the sliding glass door at the same time. There we were, two ghosts at a party meant for the living. Emma saw me first. Her hand froze halfway to her cup. For a brief second, her expression was naked shock, eyes wide, lips parted. Then training kicked in. She smoothed her features, forced a small, brittle smile. "Hey," she said, voice just loud enough for the nearest people to hear. "You came." Mark turned at her words. When he saw us, me by the gate, Lena near the deck stairs, his face drained of color. Whatever lightness he'd been wearing earlier fell off him like a costume slipping from weak seams. "Wow, full house," someone from the team joked, oblivious. "Did we move this to Bring Your Spouse Day without telling me?" A few people laughed. The sound rang false in my ears. Lena was the first to move. She walked down the steps with a grace that came, I think, from exhaustion more than confidence. She stopped near the center of the yard, where both Mark and Emma could see her clearly. "Morning," she said. Her tone was calm, not icy, not performative, just steady. "Lena, what are you doing here?" Mark's voice cracked slightly. He stepped toward her, then seemed to think better of it when he noticed how many eyes were on them. "I thought it would be nice to support your work event," she replied, "since you've been spending so much time at the office lately." A hush fell, someone coughed. The grill hissed in the background, an unbothered witness. I walked over then, closing the distance between me and Emma. Her eyes tracked every step. There was fear there, but also something like relief, as if a burden she'd been straining to hold suddenly became too heavy to keep pretending about. "Hi," I said quietly when I reached her. "Hi," she echoed. Her hand shook slightly around her cup. Mark looked between the four of us, jaw tight. His coworkers watched with poorly masked curiosity, the way people do when a car slows at an accident but doesn't stop. Nobody shouted, nobody named what this was. We didn't need to. The truth hung in the air like the smell of smoke, impossible to ignore, impossible to explain away as anything else. For a few long moments, we all just stood there. 4 points of a broken square, the people they chose and the people they left behind. "This burger looks done," one of the coworkers muttered awkwardly, flipping meat that clearly didn't need flipping. I almost laughed. Because life doesn't pause for your personal earthquake. The grill keeps hissing. The drinks stay cold. The world hums along while your internal map redraws itself. I didn't make a speech, didn't announce anything. Instead, I turned slightly toward Emma, lowering my voice. "This is what it looks like," I said. "When truth and lies occupy the same space, there's no neat separation. No safe little corner." Her eyes shone, not quite with tears, but with something rawer. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am." "I know," I replied, "and I believe you. That's part of what makes this hurt so much." Nearby, Lena looked at Mark, her gaze more tired than angry. "You said you were confused," she said softly enough that only those closest could hear. "You said you needed time. You forgot to mention you needed it with her." He opened his mouth, closed it again. No spin seemed convincing in this light. I realized then that whatever satisfaction I'd thought I might feel seeing him cornered was faint. He wasn't a supervillain. He was just a man who'd made selfish choices and then kept making them. The real fracture had always been between me and Emma, between who we thought we were to each other and who we'd actually become. The rest of the barbecue unfolded in awkward fragments. People drifted back to conversations, but everything felt off-axis. Some avoided us altogether. Others came over later with careful questions, more out of concern for gossip than concern for us. I stayed for an hour, long enough to be present, long enough to let the reality of this new arrangement settle. They were no longer doing this in secret. Whatever they chose now, they chose in the light. When I finally told Emma I was leaving, we stood near the side gate, half screened by a tree. The sun had climbed higher, bright but gentle, morning easing into afternoon. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. It sounded strange, thanking me for showing up to the scene of my own humiliation, but I understood what she meant. "Thank you for not hiding. Thank you for not turning this into a war. You'll be okay," I said. It wasn't a curse. It wasn't even a blessing, just a simple belief. She'd made her choices. She'd either grow from them or repeat them. That path was hers now. "What about you?" she asked. "Will you?" I looked past her for a moment, at the open yard, at the bright sky, at the mundane clutter of plastic cups and paper plates. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I had to defend. It just felt unwritten. "I don't know what it looks like yet," I said, "but I know it won't be built on pretending." That's already better than what we had at the end. A quiet passed between us, not hostile, not warm, just quiet, the kind you get when two people finally stop trying to force a shape that doesn't fit anymore. "I meant what I said the other day," she added, "about you seeing me, about your calm being permanent. I hope one day you can forgive me, not so we can get back together. Just so you don't have to carry this like a stone forever." Forgiveness, that word used to mean erasing the wrong. Now it sounded more like setting it down and walking forward anyway. I'm working on it, I said, for me. Not for you. She nodded. That hurt her, but she accepted it. I stepped through the gate. The latch clicked behind me, a small, final sound. The street beyond was quiet. A light breeze stirred the leaves. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler ticked rhythmically. As I walked toward my car, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel that morning. Lightness. Not joy, not relief, just a loosening. Like a knot that had been tightened for months was finally beginning to give. On the drive home, sunlight flickered through the trees that lined the road. Patches of brightness and shadow moved lazily over the windshield. It made me think of those last few years with Emma, how we kept trying to stand only in the light, refusing to admit how much shadow we were ignoring. Back at the apartment, I left the door open for a moment longer than usual, letting the cool afternoon air drift inside. Then I closed it gently. No slam, no dramatic click. The rooms were the same as I'd left them. Unmade bed, half-finished book on the coffee table, 2 mugs by the sink, but they felt different now. Less like the waiting room of a life on hold, more like the starting point of something that, while still lonely, belonged entirely to me. I made another cup of coffee. Not out of habit this time, but because I wanted the warmth in my hands. I took it to the balcony and sat in the cheap folding chair we'd bought years ago. Below, the city moved at its usual pace. Cars, footsteps, fragments of conversation rising and falling. For the first time since the night of that backyard barbecue, I let myself fully replay her smile, not to torture myself with it, not to cling to it, just to see it clearly and then let it go. There she was by the fence looking up at him, that contained, secret smile, the one that had told me everything and nothing all at once. I watched it like I was watching a scene from a movie I'd seen too many times. Then in my mind, I allowed the camera to pull back, away from her, away from him, away from that narrow frame where they were the entire world. The shot widened. There I was too, at the grill, watching. The man who thought loving hard and being steady would be enough. The man who didn't know yet that sometimes people confuse calm with emptiness and safety with sleep. I looked at that version of myself with something close to compassion. He didn't deserve what came next, but he survived it. I took a slow breath. The air felt cleaner somehow. People talk about forgiveness like it's a door you walk through once. In reality, it's more like a series of small, quiet choices. To not replay the worst moments on loop. To not turn your own pain into the center of every room. To accept that the person who hurt you is more than the worst thing they did, while still drawing a clear line between then and now. Emma would go on with her life. Maybe with Mark, maybe without him. Maybe she'd learn, maybe she wouldn't. That was her story to live, her lessons to repeat or outgrow. Mine was simpler and harder. To build a life where I didn't need to disappear in order for someone else to feel alive. To stay kind without being naive. To stay open without being blind. As the sun began to lower, casting my small balcony in a soft, golden wash, a kind of quiet settled in my chest that didn't feel like emptiness anymore. It felt like space for something new, something honest, something that might hurt again someday, but would never be built on me not looking. I raised my mug slightly, a small, private gesture to no one in particular. To the man I'd been, to the woman I'd loved, to the version of us that existed once and ended beside a smoking grill and a secret smile. And then, very gently, I let them go. Gently, I let them go.